The story I'm about to tell you is this. After I slapped my husband's mistress, he broke my leg and locked me in the basement. So, I called my father, a powerful godfather. "Dad," I said, "don't leave anyone in that family alive." It was our 3rd wedding anniversary. I wanted to surprise Ethan, so I wrapped up my appointments at New York Fashion Week ahead of schedule. As I opened the door to our Park Avenue penthouse, the sharp, dry click of my stilettos echoed on the Italian marble floor. In the living room, scattered everywhere, were bras and women's underwear. The trail led to the 2nd floor, to our bedroom. My heart began to pound and my palms grew cold and sweaty, but stupidly, I still hadn't lost a shred of hope. Maybe the maid was just cleaning, but that hope was shattered the moment I heard familiar moans from the room. "Ethan, what if your wife comes back suddenly?" Chloe's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Don't worry, darling. Olivia is in New York, but she won't be back until the day after tomorrow." Ethan's ragged breath was filled with an excitement I'd never heard from him before. And even if she came back, what could she do? She's just a nobody who lives off me. I was outside the door, trembling from head to toe. Chloe, my best friend from college, was sleeping with my husband in my own bed. My last 3 years, which I had dedicated entirely to that family, had been reduced by Ethan to those of a parasite. My patience ran out. I threw the door open. The ghastly sight of 2 white, intertwined bodies hit me in the face. "Olivia!" Ethan hastily rolled off Chloe. Chloe screamed and covered herself with a sheet, but there was a defiant smirk on her face. "Olivia, listen to me. You don't understand. Shut up." My hand landed on her cheek with all my strength. Chloe's face snapped to the side. Her perfectly sculpted nose twisted, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her lips. "Olivia, have you lost your mind?" Ethan leaped out of bed and punched me in the stomach. I doubled over in pain, but I lifted my head in rage to glare at him. "Ethan, how could you do this to me?" "How could I? Who do you think you are?" "Just some simple designer." He grabbed my hair and dragged me towards the stairs. "Marrying me was the greatest honor for your family. How dare you hurt Chloe? Her father is the president of the Carter Group." Though I felt my scalp being ripped out, I started to laugh. "Ah, so you betray me because her family is richer than ours. Have you forgotten who stood by you when you were starting from nothing? Shut your filthy mouth." In a fit of rage, he pushed me. I lost my balance and tumbled down the stairs. My right leg hit a decorative column on a corner with a sickening crunch. It was followed by a pain so intense my vision nearly went black. "Stop with the theatrics and get up." Ethan came down and kicked my broken leg. I screamed immediately, my back drenched in a cold sweat. "Ethan, I think her leg is broken." Chloe rushed down, wrapped in the sheet. Seeing the unnatural twist of my leg, she turned pale. What a pain. Ethan frowned, then grabbed my arm and dragged me towards the basement. "Leave her there to cool off. She needs to learn her place." I nearly lost consciousness from the pain, but I bit my lips to keep from making another sound. As he threw me into the damp, dark basement, I heard Ethan tell the maid, "Nobody gives her food for the next 24 hours. Let her reflect." The heavy iron door slammed shut, and darkness swallowed everything. I huddled in a corner. My right leg was so swollen it was unrecognizable, and with the pain, I was losing track of time. I reached into my pocket and found my phone. Luckily, it hadn't broken. At the bottom of my contacts was a number I hadn't called in 20 years. The saved name was a single word, Dad. I pressed the call button. After 3 rings, a deep, authoritative voice answered, "Who is this?" "Dad." My voice was a hoarse whisper. "It's me, Olivia." There were a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line, then the sound of a chair falling over and a worried voice. "Olivia, where are you? What happened?" My husband broke my leg and locked me in the basement. Each word was like a stab in my throat. "Dad, help me. Send me the address. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Before hanging up, I heard him yelling furious orders to get the cars ready. With a trembling hand, I sent the location and then started to laugh. I laughed until tears streamed down my cheeks. Stupid Ethan thought I was just some ordinary designer. He never imagined who my father was. My mother had revealed it to me on her deathbed. My father was Don Michael Russo, the head of the syndicate, a powerful organization that controlled not just New York, but much of the East Coast. My mother, who didn't want me to be part of that world, left him and raised me alone. Out of respect for her wish, I had sworn to live without the shadow of my family. I hadn't even told my father about my wedding. What good was all that nobility now? Not even a minute had passed when I heard hurried footsteps and sounds of a struggle upstairs. After that, the basement door was kicked open. In the blinding light, a burly man in a black suit approached quickly. "Miss, I'm Liam. The Godfather sent me to pick you up." He knelt, examined my leg, and his face changed. Sons of. As Liam carefully lifted me, I saw 2 unconscious bodyguards near the door. They were Ethan's men, posted to watch me. Upstairs, on the landing, Ethan and Chloe were on their knees, held by other men in black. Their faces were masks of terror. "Olivia, who are these people? What are you doing?" Ethan shouted as he struggled. Leaning weakly on Liam's shoulder, I gave him a bloody smile. "I'll introduce you. This is my father's right-hand man. As for who my father is, you'll find out very soon, Ethan." As Liam carried me towards a limousine parked outside, I heard Chloe's hysterical shriek. "Impossible! Olivia's father died a long time ago." Inside the car, a middle-aged man with graying hair waited nervously. Seeing my pitiful state, a deadly glint crossed his eyes. "Olivia, Dad, they will break those animals' legs, all of them." His voice was as cold as ice. "And from the Carter family, don't leave anyone alive." As Liam quickly carried me out of the basement, the early summer sunlight was so dazzling I couldn't open my eyes. I gritted my teeth until I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth to endure the sharp pain in my right leg. "Miss, just a little longer." Liam's voice was calm and strong. His scent, mixed with a faint smell of gunpowder, strangely soothed me. Behind me, I heard Ethan's screams. "This is breaking and entering. I'm calling the police." "Olivia, who the hell did you call?" I no longer felt the need to turn around. Liam's men would take care of him. The moment the limousine door opened, I came face to face with my father, Don Michael Russo, for the first time in 20 years. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was almost completely white, but his eagle-like eyes, as sharp as a knife, hadn't changed. At that moment, they were fixed on my shattered leg. "Olivia." My father's voice trembled slightly. He reached out a hand to me but stopped mid-air. "Liam, to Mount Sinai Hospital. Call Dr. Miller. Tell him to prep the operating room." I was carefully placed on the leather seats of the luxurious sedan. My father used cushions to prop up my leg. He pressed a button, and a soundproof partition rose, separating us from the driver. "Who did this?" His question was brief, but his voice was as cold as an iceberg. "My husband, Ethan Hayes," I said with a bitter smile. "I caught him cheating on me with my friend, Chloe Carter." My father's gaze was like the sea before a storm. Calm on the surface, but with a force capable of destroying everything. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Investigate 2 people, Ethan Hayes and Chloe Carter. Carter is the daughter of President Grant Carter." "Okay, don't touch them for now. Wait for my orders." He hung up and turned to me. "Why did you never call me?" "After your mother left, I kept looking for you. Mom didn't want me involved with the syndicate," I replied quietly. "I went to art school. I got a job at a reputable firm. I thought I could live a normal life." A muscle in my father's cheek twitched. "And that's why you married an animal who broke your leg?" I couldn't answer. Outside the window, the city landscape rushed by as fast as my 3 years of a foolish marriage. At the hospital's VIP entrance, several doctors were waiting for us. Dr. Miller, the best orthopedic surgeon in the country, personally pushed my gurney towards the elevator. My father held my hand the entire time, right up to the entrance of the operating room. His hand was rough but warm. The operation was a success. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room that looked like a 5-star hotel suite. My right leg, in a cast, was elevated. Outside the window was a magnificent night view of the city. My father was sitting on the sofa by the bed, reading documents under a lamplight. His profile looked particularly cold and hard. "Dad," I called out softly. He immediately put down the documents and came over. "How are you feeling?" The doctor said the surgery went well, but you have to stay in bed without moving for 2 months. Thank you. I hesitated for a moment, then asked, And Ethan and the others? Liam has taken care of it. A deadly glint crossed my father's eyes. Your stupid husband thought we were just neighborhood thugs. He kept shouting he would report us. I laughed, but the wound caused a pang of pain. Poor, naive Ethan. He had no idea who he had messed with. The syndicate was a vast organization that controlled the politics and economy of the East Coast from the shadows. Not even high-ranking government officials dared to confront them. Olivia, I want to hear your opinion. My father sat beside me. According to the rules of the syndicate, by now, that bastard Ethan should be at the bottom of the East River. I closed my eyes. I remembered the day I met Ethan. 3 years ago, he was a young entrepreneur just starting his business. He waited outside my office for a month, saying he wanted me to design his company's logo. He said my designs had soul, that he had never met a woman as special as me. I want him to experience a pain worse than death. When I opened my eyes again, a cold voice came from my mouth. The Hayes family, on the surface, is a construction giant, but behind the scenes, they built their fortune through loan sharking and illegal evictions. I want Ethan to watch everything crumble before his eyes until he has nothing left, just like he did to me. A smile of satisfaction appeared on my father's face. He pulled a folder from his jacket. Just in time. My men just discovered the Hayes are betting everything on the bid for the new Elysian Fields real estate development at Hudson Yards. The bidding documents are full of inflated figures. He flipped through the pages and pointed to one. And the funniest part is, your dear husband has embezzled $3 million from the company's funds to launder at a private casino on the Upper East Side and still hasn't covered the hole. I took the documents. My heart began to pound. With this evidence alone, I could put Ethan in jail and sink Hayes Construction's stock. Dad, I need time, I said, taking a deep breath. I'll pretend I've forgiven him. I'll go back to his house and gather more evidence. It's too dangerous, my father frowned. Please, I took his hand. I want to destroy him with my own hands. After a long silence, my father finally nodded. All right, but Liam will stay by your side. 24/7. He pressed a buzzer to call Liam, who was waiting outside. From now on, my life belongs to the young lady. Liam knelt and handed me a special phone. Miss, here is my direct number and the Godfather's emergency contacts. In case of any danger, press this red button and we'll be there in 3 minutes. I took the phone. Its weight felt like the key to a new life. At that moment, Ethan appeared at my door, his face terrified. His suit was wrinkled, and he had deep, dark circles under his eyes. It was clear he hadn't slept in days. Oh, Olivia. His voice trembled. He was holding a small bouquet of carnations. I didn't know your father was Don Michael Russo. Seriously. I composed my face into a tired but forgiving smile. I made a mistake too, Ethan. I shouldn't have hurt Chloe. Ethan rushed towards the bed as if he'd found a lifeline. Olivia, do you forgive me? I lost my mind. Chloe seduced me. It won't happen again, I promise. Seeing his clumsy performance, I felt like throwing up the soup I had just had, but the show had to go on. Dad has already taught you a good lesson. Let's forget it, I said calmly. When I get out of the hospital, we'll start over, okay? Ethan, unable to contain his joy, nodded repeatedly. He couldn't imagine that while he held my hand with his hypocritical fingers, a hidden camera in the room was recording his every expression. The day of my discharge, my father sent a Mercedes to take me to the Hayes' home. The scene was so grand it made the local news. Ethan paled when he saw it was Liam himself pushing my wheelchair towards the house. If the young lady gets a single scratch, Liam whispered in Ethan's ear, loud enough for me to hear, the Godfather said he'll watch you be eaten alive by stray dogs. Ethan began to tremble so violently he almost wet his pants. Returning to the place I once called home made me nauseous, especially the bedroom. Even though Ethan had changed the sheets, I could still imagine him rolling around there with Chloe. Olivia, rest up. I have to take care of something at the office. Ethan gave me a glass of water and tried to leave quickly. All right, come back soon. I smiled as I watched him leave and immediately poured the water into a plant pot. Liam stood outside the door. I opened my laptop and started to work. As Ethan's wife, I knew the passwords to all his devices. Accessing his cloud account, I quickly found what I was looking for: hotel reservations for the last 6 months, bank transfers, and even some videos that were hard for me to watch. Bastard. I smiled coldly as I saved the evidence. At that moment, a new message popped up on the screen. Chloe. Thank God that idiot believed everything. I'm waiting for you at our usual spot. I've missed you so much, honey. I looked at the screen and burst out laughing. Ethan, you couldn't even last 3 days. Fine, my revenge will be even more fun. I picked up the special phone and called my father. Dad, I think we can start buying some shares of Hayes Construction. Yes, quietly, without anyone noticing. After the call, I looked at the sunlight outside the window. I used to believe love was everything. I willingly accepted hiding my own light to be Ethan's shadow. But now, that innocent Olivia had been shattered, just like the bone in her leg. From now on, I would make it clear to everyone what the price was for touching the daughter of the head of the syndicate. Miss, are you sure you want to do this? Liam asked, standing by the dressing room door with a frown. I was adjusting my earrings in front of the full-length mirror. The woman in the reflection wore a deep red dress. Her red lips were as vivid as blood. The cast had been removed from her right leg, but in its place was a delicate metal brace that peeked out slightly from the slit of her dress. Of course, I turned to Liam. The Hayezis are having an anniversary party. How could I, the hostess, miss it? Liam opened his mouth to say something but closed it again. In the 2 weeks since I had returned home, I had outwardly reconciled with Ethan, but behind the scenes, through my father's contacts, I had already bought 3% of Hayes Construction's stock and had contacted 2 small shareholders willing to sell. The phone vibrated. A message from my father. Mason Miller has arrived in New York. He will attend the party tonight as a guest. He's bringing what you need. A corner of my mouth lifted. Mason Miller, son of an old friend of my father's and a financial genius trained on Wall Street. He was the man in charge of the syndicate's legal investments. With his help, my plan would take off. Miss, the car is ready. Liam handed me a silver USB drive. The video you requested has been processed. I put the USB drive in my clutch. The cold metal glinted under the lights, just like my mood at that moment. The anniversary party for the founding of Hayes Construction, which was also our wedding anniversary, was held at the Plaza Hotel. The moment I entered the ballroom on Ethan's arm, hundreds of eyes were on me, curiosity, surprise, and above all, an almost morbid expectation, as if I were a sideshow. After all, the rumor that a tycoon's daughter-in-law had caught her husband cheating with her best friend had spread like wildfire in high society. Olivia, you look beautiful tonight, Ethan whispered in my ear. His warm breath on my neck made me nauseous. I suppressed my disgust and smiled sweetly. It's an important night. I can't let you down. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. The sweet and understanding attitude I had shown him in the past 2 weeks, and even the fact that I had convinced my father to forgive him, must have convinced him that I had forgotten everything. Poor fool. My in-laws approached with forced smiles on their faces. After discovering my true identity, the attitude of this pair of social climbers had done a 180-degree turn. My dear, is your leg a little better? Ethan has been a child. We thank you so much for your understanding, my father-in-law said, rubbing his hands. I responded with a smile and looked around the room. I immediately located Chloe standing by the pyramid of champagne glasses. She was wearing a white lace dress that made her look like a cheap wedding cake. She shot me a look full of resentment. I'm going to say hello to an old friend. I released Ethan's arm and, leaning on my cane, walked towards Chloe. Her face paled, and she instinctively stepped back. Chloe, long time no see. My voice was neither too loud nor too low, just enough for some people around us to hear. White suits you. You look like the ghost you played in the university play. Some people around us couldn't help but chuckle softly. Chloe's face turned white, then red as a tomato. Olivia, don't be so arrogant. Ethan is only with you because he's afraid of your father. I covered her mouth with my finger. On such an important day as this, let's not say things that will ruin the mood. I leaned into her ear and whispered in a voice only she could hear, there will be a fun show later. Try to keep your composure." Before she could respond, I turned elegantly and met Mason Miller, who had just arrived. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, and his eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses were as sharp as an eagle's. "Miss Russo, I've heard a lot about you." He gently kissed the back of my hand. "The Godfather is very proud of you, Mr. Miller." I smiled. "After the party, do you have time to talk?" "It would be an honor." We exchanged a silent promise and parted ways. The party began, and my father-in-law went on stage to boast about Hayes Construction's achievements. He didn't mention a single word about the $3 million hole in the funds. I, sitting at the head table, played the perfect wife, maintaining a dignified smile and occasionally adjusting my husband's tie. Finally, I thank my daughter-in-law, Olivia, for her understanding and generosity. My father-in-law suddenly mentioned me. "We all make mistakes when we're young. The important thing is that the family stays together." And now, a toast to this wonderful couple. Everyone raised their glasses. I lowered my head to hide the contempt in my eyes, and when I looked up, I wore a loving smile. Ethan, moved, took my hand. "Olivia, I'll spend the rest of my life repaying you." "A whole lifetime isn't necessary," I said softly. "You can start now." Leaving him with his confused look, I leaned on my cane and slowly walked up to the stage, taking the microphone from the MC. "I thank everyone for coming to our party despite your busy schedules." My voice was clear and distinct. "As the wife of this family, I've prepared a special gift." I signaled to the lighting technicians. The lights in the hall dimmed, and a large screen slowly descended from the ceiling. Ethan's face tensed, as if he had a bad feeling. "No, Olivia, please." He rushed onto the stage to stop me. But Liam, who suddenly appeared behind him, held his shoulders in an iron grip. "Honey, enjoy the show." I pressed the button on the remote. On the high-definition screen, a clear image of Ethan and Chloe rolling around in my bed appeared, with crystal-clear audio. In the bottom right corner was the date, the period when I was in the hospital with a broken leg. They couldn't even last 3 days. The entire hall descended into chaos. Chloe screamed and ran for the exit but was blocked by bodyguards. My father-in-law was livid, and my mother-in-law fainted. And that's just the beginning. I changed the screen. Bank statements and security camera footage from a casino appeared. My husband embezzled $3 million from the company's funds to gamble on the Upper East Side, and because of that, the Elysian Fields project was halted, leaving hundreds of families homeless on the street. Finally, I played a recording of a phone call between Ethan and a thug hired for the evictions. "I don't care if someone dies. The important thing is that you clear that place out by tomorrow." A deathly silence fell over the room. I walked towards Ethan, who now looked like a rag doll, with each step. "In our 3 years of marriage, I gave you 7 major projects, and my designs won awards that made Hayes Construction's stock rise by 30%. My voice was soft but sharp as a knife. "And in return, you gave me betrayal, violence, and humiliation." Ethan's legs gave way, and he fell to his knees. "Olivia, I was wrong, but I forgive you." I suddenly raised my voice, addressing the shocked guests. "Because I am a wife who loves you deeply." The room was filled with murmurs again. My father-in-law, as if he'd found salvation, rushed onto the stage and snatched the microphone from me. "A misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. As you can see, my daughter-in-law has already forgiven Ethan, and now enjoy the party." I elegantly stepped off the stage and, walking through a forest of complex gazes, headed to the corner where Mason was. He offered me a glass of champagne. His eyes behind his glasses shone with admiration. "A magnificent performance. This is just the beginning." I took a sip of champagne. "Did you bring the documents?" Mason took a folder from his briefcase. "The complete ownership structure of Hayes Construction and the real financial statements for the last 3 years. Much more interesting than the public reports." I opened the file. My eyes widened. The real debt of Hayes Construction was more than 3 times the declared amount, and huge sums of money had been diverted through shell companies. "This is enough for a short sale." "More than enough," Mason smiled. "I've already contacted 3 specialized funds. They're just waiting for your signal." The party continued in a surreal atmosphere. Ethan followed me like a stray dog, endlessly begging for forgiveness. I maintained a dignified smile the whole time, looking like an indulgent wife with her unfaithful husband. My dear, about the board of directors, my father-in-law took me aside, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. Don't worry, father-in-law. I held his arm affectionately. I've already told my father to stop buying Hayes Construction shares. We're a family, aren't we? My father-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. He couldn't imagine that through an offshore company, I already owned 5% of Hayes's shares, and together with the 8% promised to me by 2 small shareholders, I was already the 4th largest shareholder. At the end of the party, Mason accompanied me home. Liam sat in the front passenger seat, not letting his guard down for a moment. Next week, Hayes Construction's stock will plummet, Mason analyzed. With the scandal you've exposed tonight and the help of our funds, they'll have a maximum drop for at least 3 days. Good, I said as I watched the city lights rush past the window. When they fall, we'll buy everything. When the car stopped in front of the mansion, Mason suddenly asked, "Have you really forgiven him?" I smiled and pointed to my right leg, which still needed the brace. "Mr. Miller? Do you believe in turning the other cheek?" "No. Coincidentally, neither do I." Inside the mansion, Ethan was kneeling in the living room, crying like a child. As I looked down at him, the situation seemed utterly ridiculous. This was the man I once loved. This coward, this despicable creature with no spine. "Olivia, I was wrong. I was really wrong," he sobbed, grabbing one of my legs and staining my expensive dress with snot and tears. I gently stroked his head, like one does with a dog. "Ethan, let's start over." He lifted his head, and a glimmer of hope shone in his eyes. But I continued, "I want to see your sincerity. I've heard that Chloe's father will participate in the bidding for the development of the new North District." Ethan immediately understood my intention. "Tomorrow, I'll break all agreements with the Carter family." "Very good." I patted his cheek. "Now go to sleep. You have to go to work tomorrow." After Ethan went upstairs thanking me 1,000 times, I went into the study and locked the door. I called my father. "Dad, it's time for the next step." "Yes, I need proof of the Carter family's illegal activities." After hanging up, I opened the computer and re-watched the video from the party. The image paused on Ethan kneeling, begging for forgiveness. I pressed the delete button without hesitation. This was just the beginning, my dear husband. Soon you will discover that losing everything is the real pain, much more intense than physical pain. On the morning of the 3rd day after the party scandal, I was sitting at the table, elegantly eating Greek yogurt with berries and honey. The brace on my right leg had been replaced with a lighter model. Ethan came downstairs with his tie crooked. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. "Want some coffee?" I offered him a cup of hot latte. He looked at the cup suspiciously and didn't take it. "No, thanks. I have to take care of something at the office." I shrugged and took a sip. Ethan's behavior in the past few days had been quite amusing. In public, he bowed to me, but when we were alone, he wouldn't even touch the food I had touched. Liam's warning had undoubtedly had its effect. "Oh, by the way," I stopped him as he was leaving. "Tonight there's a charity auction at a club downtown. I've donated your Patek Philippe. Is that okay?" Ethan's face tensed. That watch was from his grandfather, a limited edition. "I know," I smiled sweetly. "That's why its price is higher, isn't it? The news is already in all the papers. The young heir of Hayes Construction donates a family heirloom to help those in need." He clenched his fists and then forced a smile that was worse than a grimace. "Of course, that's fine." As I watched him flee, I checked the security cameras on my phone. The moment he got in the car, Ethan was busy making a call 9 times out of 10, complaining to Chloe. After I exposed their scandal at the party, they had officially broken up, but secretly, the phone vibrated. A message from Mason. "The funds are ready." This morning, at the market opening, Hayes Construction shares registered a maximum drop. A corner of my mouth lifted in satisfaction. The party video had gone viral online, and the hashtag number Hayes Scandal had become the #1 trending topic. The board of directors had requested an urgent suspension of trading, but they couldn't stop the stock's fall. Liam appeared silently at the door. "Miss, the car is ready." Today we'll first stop by the clinic for a checkup and then go to the investigation agency Dad recommended. In the clinic hallway, I ran into an unexpected person, Chloe, hiding behind sunglasses and a mask. She was cautiously leaving the gynecology department. I quickly hid behind a corner and secretly photographed the receipt she was paying. Positive pregnancy test. Zooming in on the image, I couldn't help but smile. It seems Ethan's penance on the night of the party paid off. In Chloe's womb, a little bastard was indeed growing. After the checkup, I told Liam to drive to an anonymous office building on the outskirts of the city. The elevator took us to the top floor. When the doors opened, an office filled with electronic equipment appeared. A thin man in a plaid shirt stared intently at 6 monitors simultaneously. "Miss Russo, I'm Cole," he said without even turning around. "The things the Godfather asked me to look for are all here." Cole played several security camera videos. The recordings showed Ethan and Chloe meeting at a motel on the city's edge. This had happened just the afternoon before. But there was something more interesting. Cole switched screens, showing Chloe's father, Grant Carter, and Ethan's father, Vincent Hayes, meeting secretly in a luxurious private club. They meet here regularly on the 15th of every month. They've been doing it for at least 5 years. I narrowed my eyes. Is it possible to record their conversations? "A bit difficult," Cole said, scratching his head. "The security at that place is very tight. Use this." I took the fountain pen my father had given me from my purse. "The next time they meet, bribe a waiter and have him slip it into Grant Carter's pocket." Cole took the pen, and his eyes lit up. A state-of-the-art micro-spy device. I didn't know the Godfather had access to these things. Upon leaving the agency, I called my father. "Dad, Chloe is pregnant." "No, don't touch her for now. That child could be useful." "Oh, and Grant Carter and my father-in-law meet regularly. Something suspicious." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Olivia, the relationship between the Carter and Hayes families might be more complicated than you think. 20 years ago." 20 years ago? "What happened 20 years ago?" I insisted. My father replied with an unusually hesitant voice, "I'll investigate further and let you know. Tonight at the party, be careful with Chloe." After hanging up, I was lost in thought. My father was clearly hiding something, and I instinctively felt it had to do with my mother. As evening fell, I put on a dress from Chanel's latest collection and asked the makeup artist for an ethereal and fragile look, elegant yet pitiable. Liam handed me a jewelry box from The Godfather. Inside was a diamond necklace with a rare black pearl in the center. I remembered seeing that necklace in a photo of my mother. Arriving at the club, Liam asked, "Miss, do you want me to come in with you?" "No, wait in the car." I toyed with the black pearl on my neck. "I can handle tonight's show." The charity auction at that exclusive club was always a major event for high society. The moment I entered, the noisy room suddenly fell silent. Then, whispers were heard everywhere. "It's the daughter-in-law of Hayes Construction. They say her father is a boss who controls half the East Coast, that Ethan is completely blind to leave her for someone like Chloe Carter." I pretended not to hear anything and went to my reserved seat in the front row. The moment I sat down, a strong smell of perfume stung my nose. "Olivia, long time no see." Chloe approached me in a white dress, deliberately showing off her slightly bulging belly. "I heard your leg still isn't well." "What a shame." I smiled and looked at her belly. "You must be about 3 months along. You have to be careful in the early stages of pregnancy." Chloe's face tensed slightly. She didn't expect me to know about her pregnancy. "Ethan is delighted with this child." She lowered her voice, her eyes shining with malice. "He says he'll divorce you after I give birth." "Really?" I took the tablet from my bag and played a video. "Then how do you explain this conversation from yesterday afternoon?" In the video, Ethan was neurotically pulling his hair. "Why does a child have to come now? My father doesn't want to see you. The company's stock has plummeted. If that crazy woman finds out we're still seeing each other, it will be the end of me." Chloe's face turned ashen. "How?" "The curtains in room 308 of that motel weren't even closed properly," I sighed lightly. "If you want to be unfaithful, at least learn the basics, friend." The people around us didn't understand our conversation, but Chloe's appearance, on the verge of fainting, attracted everyone's attention. I stood up and deliberately raised my voice. Chloe, you don't look well. Do you want me to call a doctor for the child you're carrying? What? Chloe Carter is pregnant? It must be Ethan Hayes's. Of course, the whispers spread like a wave. Chloe, in a panic, tripped on her own dress and fell spectacularly in front of everyone. When she got up, trembling, a large, bright red bloodstain spread across her white dress. "Ah, my baby!" she screamed hysterically. I watched the scene with cold eyes and called 911. Tonight's show had gone better than expected. Not only had Chloe been publicly humiliated, but she herself had revealed her pregnancy. Tomorrow morning, the gossip columnists would have plenty to write about. Before the ambulance arrived, I made sure to call Ethan for Chloe. Ethan's first reaction to the news that his mistress had had a miscarriage was, surprisingly, "Damn it, my father is going to kill me now." Hearing those words, Chloe lost consciousness. Of course, I didn't stay for the auction. Returning to the Hayes mansion, I found Ethan in the study, furiously trashing everything. Seeing me, he lunged at me with bloodshot eyes. "What did you do to her?" I blinked innocently. "Everyone saw it. She fell on her own." On the other hand, your words at that motel were truly moving. Ethan froze as if struck by lightning. "You've been spying on me." "It doesn't matter," I said, sitting down elegantly. "What matters is that I've decided to help you two be together. Let's get a divorce." I said the word lightly. "I'm tired of this fake marriage." A glint of greed shone in Ethan's eyes, immediately replaced by doubt. "Under what conditions?" "In the name of our past relationship, I'll only take what's mine." I opened a document I had prepared. "This house is mine, and you'll give me 5% of the company's shares." "In your dreams," Ethan jumped up. "Do you know this house is worth $4 million? And the shares?" "Don't even think about it." I sighed and took a small stack of photos from a drawer. "Then these photos will be in all the papers tomorrow morning." The photos showed Ethan not only with Chloe but with at least 3 other women. The most shocking was a photo showing him playing at the high-stakes game with members of a local syndicate. Ethan's face turned gray. "I'll give you 3 days. Think it over." I put the photos away. "Oh, by the way, even though Chloe lost the baby, your father will be happy. He hates the Carter family." "No!" Ethan suddenly lifted his head. "How do you know my father hates the Carters?" "Just a guess," I smiled. "Otherwise, why would he forbid you from seeing her?" Ethan looked at me suspiciously and then left, slamming the door. I immediately called the investigator. "Cole, thoroughly investigate the relationship between Vincent Hayes and Grant Carter, especially the events of 20 years ago." After hanging up, I opened the computer to review my day's earnings. According to Chloe's medical history, she had not only miscarried, but the shock had damaged her uterus, making future pregnancies difficult. An unexpected bonus. The phone vibrated. An audio file from my father. I put on my headphones. I heard Grant Carter's furious voice. "Vincent, have you forgotten what happened 20 years ago? If I hadn't gotten rid of that body for you?" The recording cut off abruptly, but the content was shocking enough. Vincent was my father-in-law's name. The word body made my skin crawl. Then a message from my father arrived. "Olivia, come see me tomorrow. I have things to tell you." I stared at the phone screen, my heart pounding. What happened 20 years ago? Whose body was it? Did it have anything to do with my mother's sudden death? Outside, lightning split the night sky. My face, reflected in the window, was pale and cold. In my eyes, the fire of revenge burned. "Ethan, did you think the divorce was the end?" "No. It's just the signal that the next phase of my revenge is about to begin." My father's estate was located in the middle of a dense pine forest in the Catskills. In front of the gate, surrounded by high walls, stood 2 bodyguards in black suits. The entire drive with Liam, I was thinking about that recording, getting rid of the body. Those words were stuck in my mind like thorns. "Miss, we've arrived," Liam reminded me softly. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father was pruning his old olive trees in the garden. Each of his movements was precise and measured, showing a quiet strength. He didn't look his age. "Olivia." He stopped and beckoned me to follow him inside. My leg was much better. I could walk without a cane. I followed him to his study. The air was thick with the smell of tobacco and leather. The study was exactly as I remembered. Even the Celadon ceramic vase, my mother's favorite, was in its place. My father took a yellowed envelope from a safe. His expression was serious. 20 years ago, when your mother left me, she was pregnant with you. I know, I nodded, but you don't know why she left. My father took out a faded photo and slid it in front of me. Look at this man. In the photo, a young Vincent Hayes was posing in front of a construction site with an unknown man. They were holding champagne glasses, and behind them was a banner that read, "Inauguration of Hayes Construction Project." The unknown man had his arm over my father-in-law's shoulder and was smiling broadly. Who is this man? I frowned. Grant Carter's brother, Connor Carter. My father's voice was as cold as ice. And he was also the one who killed your mother. I dug my nails into my palm without realizing it. What really happened then? Vincent Hayes and the Carters were collaborating on a redevelopment project using illegal evictions. In one of them, someone died. Connor Carter beat a protester to death. My father took out another document. Your mother photographed the evidence and wanted to report them. The document contained several blurry photos. Connor Carter was holding an iron bar, and on the ground was a bloodied resident. The date on the photo was a week before my mother's death. Connor Carter found out and went to her apartment. My father's voice trembled slightly. By the time I got there, it was too late. I looked at the photo with blurry vision. The truth about my mother's death, which at 5 years old I was told was an accidental fall, was so horrible. The police closed the case quickly due to pressure from the Hayes and Carter families. And Connor Carter? My voice was a hoarse whisper. He died. My father smiled contemptuously. 3 days after the funeral, in a car accident. I suddenly looked up. My father's gaze told me everything. It wasn't an accident. Vincent Hayes and Grant Carter covered everything up, my father said, arranging the documents. For years, I've been gathering evidence, but they're too entrenched in politics and business. Until you married Ethan. Then I understood my father's silence. He was waiting for me to discover the truth. I didn't want you to carry the burden of revenge, he sighed. But now you have your own reasons to retaliate. I stood up and walked to the window. The pine forest swayed in the wind like the whisper of countless suffering souls. My mother, who was so kind and taught me to draw, had died in such a cruel way. Dad, they have to pay with blood. I turned around. My voice was strangely calm. Not just Ethan, but the entire Hayes and Carter families. A flash of satisfaction shone in my father's eyes. Do you have a plan? First, we have to turn them against each other. I opened my phone and looked at the report that had just arrived from Mason. The substandard steel used in Hayes Construction's Elysian Fields project was supplied by a shell company managed by Grant Carter. My father's eyes lit up. You want them to fight? The media is ready, I said, looking at the clock. In an hour, the news about the collapse risk of Elysian Fields will be on the front page of the financial papers. My father offered me a glass of whiskey. About Carter, I've already tipped off the feds to raid their smuggled containers at the port. They'll act tonight. The glasses clinked with a dry sound. In that moment, I was my father's heir. I was no longer the foolish woman crying inside the prison of her marriage. Leaving the estate, Liam handed me an envelope. Miss, these are internal documents from Hayes Construction that Cole found. As I skimmed through the confidential documents, I smiled without realizing it. Ethan's embezzlement was worse than expected. Not only had he lost at gambling, but he had also forged the minutes of the board of directors to secretly mortgage the company's main assets. Liam, let's not go back to the mansion. Let's go to Hayes Construction headquarters. I changed my mind suddenly. It was time to visit my dear husband. In the boardroom on the top floor of Hayes Construction headquarters, an emergency meeting was being held. Through a secretary infiltrated by my father, I was receiving real-time updates from the meeting. The collapse of Elysian Fields was an accident. The media exaggerated. I heard Ethan's voice through the earpiece. He was panicking. The priority now is to stabilize the stock price. Director Hayes, the problem isn't just the media. It was an old man's voice. It was Director DeAngelis, a company veteran. According to the safety report that just arrived, all the materials failed inspection. The supplier is a subsidiary of the Carter Group. How do you explain this? I don't know anything about that, Ethan said, obviously panicking. It's the purchasing department's responsibility. The head of the purchasing department is your cousin, DeAngelis replied coldly. The board demands a full inspection, including the fate of the $3 million you spent. I heard the sound of a cup breaking and Ethan's shouts. I turned off the earpiece and cheerfully went up in the building's elevator. Destination: the top floor. When I opened the boardroom door, all the directors turned suddenly. Ethan was standing in front of the head seat, his face livid, his tie crooked. He looked like a losing rooster in a fight. "Excuse the interruption," I said, smiling and heading to an empty seat. That seat was mine, acquired through the shares my father had bought through a shell company. As a shareholder, I want to know the measures you'll take for the Elysian Fields project. Ethan's eyes looked like they would pop out of their sockets. "You? How?" "Madam, perhaps you don't know," said DeAngelis, standing up to greet me. "According to preliminary investigations, it seems the incident was due to a problem with the materials, and the supplier in question has close ties to the Carter Group." "Oh, what a coincidence," I said, feigning surprise. "My father just received information that tonight the feds will raid the Carter Group's smuggling warehouse." The boardroom descended into chaos. The directors whispered, and some had already taken out their phones to make calls. Ethan's face turned gray. He knew better than anyone. The dirty business between Hayes Construction and the Carter Group. "Gentlemen," I raised my voice, "I propose we establish an independent investigation committee to thoroughly examine all transactions between our company and the Carter Group. Furthermore, given the current unstable state of Director Ethan Hayes, I request that his duties be temporarily suspended." "You witch!" Ethan lunged to grab me, but bodyguards blocked him. "Calm down, honey," I said calmly. "It's for your own good. Imagine if your gambling debts or the documents where you mortgaged the company's assets became public." Ethan held his breath like a strangled chicken. Only then must he have understood that the cards in my hand were not just evidence of his infidelity. The board approved my proposal with an overwhelming majority. Leaving the building, the sky was as red as blood, like the fate of this city that would soon be turned upside down. The phone vibrated. A message from Mason. "Short sale successful, 60% drop in Hayes stock. Bought 11% of outstanding shares." Immediately after, a message from my father. "Fed's operation successful. Grant Carter has been arrested for investigation." I took a deep breath and got in the car. Liam handed me a cup of hot tea. "Miss, shall we go back to the mansion?" "No." I hadn't finished the sentence when I noticed a black SUV in the rearview mirror. It had been following us since we left the company. "Liam, we're being followed." Liam's gaze hardened. He pressed a button on his earpiece. "Team 2. Target in sight. Black Range Rover. License plate. GH14. Check." Not a minute had passed when the response came. "The plate is fake, but the face captured inside is that of Hayes Construction's head of security. Ethan's men." I narrowed my eyes. "When the fox is cornered, lose them and let's go to the safe house." Liam turned sharply, and the car ducked into a narrow alley. The SUV followed. The two cars engaged in a silent chase in the New York evening traffic. "Miss, hold on." Liam pressed a red button on the center console. A large amount of smoke poured from the back of the car. Taking advantage of the pursuer's obscured vision, Liam made several sharp turns and pulled the car into the underground parking of a shopping mall. We got into another prepared vehicle and left silently. Through the rear window, I saw the SUV still circling the parking lot entrance. "Ethan has started to suspect you." Liam's voice was tense. "Do you want me to tell the Godfather to send someone to take care of him?" "No, let him." I smiled contemptuously. "I need to make it clear to him that I'm not easy prey." The safe house was a secret apartment prepared by my father in the city. As soon as I entered, I opened the laptop to check the latest events. The financial news was full of the Hayes Construction scandal. On social media, the hashtag number Hayes collapse was trending. The most interesting was the news of Grant Carter's arrest, which was spreading like wildfire. It was even said that he not only trafficked in luxury goods but also drugs and weapons. The Carter Group's website had been shut down and its stock suspended from trading. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Ethan. I let it ring more than 10 times before answering. "Olivia, it was you, wasn't it?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. From the background noise, he seemed to be in a bar. "I don't know what you're talking about, honey." I put it on speaker and continued reviewing the documents. "Don't pretend. The board, the stocks, the Carters, it was all your doing." "What the hell do you want?" he shouted hysterically. "For you to feel what it's like to lose everything." My voice was as light as a feather. "Just like you made me feel." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then the sound of a glass breaking and Ethan's screams. "You'll see, you witch! I'll make you experience a pain worse than death." The call cut off abruptly. I shook my head and called Mason. "Keep buying Hayes Construction shares and spread the rumor that Grant Carter will sell all his shares to pay the smuggling fine." "Already on it," Mason laughed. "And we've discovered that Vincent Hayes has a secret account in Switzerland. For the last 5 years, a fixed amount has been deposited every month. The beneficiary is Chloe Carter." This unexpected information made me raise an eyebrow. My father-in-law was sending money to Chloe every month. Why? Investigate the reason for the transfers, and let's prepare the next plan. We have to send a very big gift to Vincent Hayes' birthday party. After hanging up, I walked to the window. The night was as black as ink, but in the distance, the lights of the Hayes construction building still shone. But by dawn, the owner of that building might change. "Ethan, did you think breaking my leg was the end?" "No. What I'm going to break is the backbone of your entire family." The night before Vincent Hayes' 70th birthday, I was in the dressing room trying on a dress in front of the mirror, a champagne-colored dress that beautifully enhanced my waist. The scar on my right leg was almost invisible. Liam knocked and entered. He was holding a velvet jewelry box. "From The Godfather. He said it would go well with your dress tomorrow." Inside was a diamond necklace. In the center, a rare red diamond emitted a blood-like light. I recognized that jewel. It was my mother's favorite when she was alive. "Where's Dad?" I touched the red diamond. It was cold as ice. "He's waiting for you in the study. Mr. Miller is also there." I put on a robe and walked barefoot to the study. When I opened the door, Dad and Mason were discussing in front of an architectural plan. Mason wore an impeccable suit, and his eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses were as sharp as an eagle's. When I entered, he nodded slightly. "Miss Russo." "Olivia, come see this," Dad called me. The real plan for Hayes Construction's Elysian Fields complex didn't show the advertised luxury residential complex, but a dense cluster of small apartments. The construction density exceeded regulations, and the green area was reduced by half. Vincent Hayes tricked the city council. Mason pointed to a stamp in a corner of the plan. "This is the final version, and the work has already begun. If this becomes public, the entire project will receive a demolition order. Hayes Construction will suffer losses of at least $100 million. I continued the conversation. My father handed me a USB drive. "Tomorrow's birthday gift is ready. And there's something even more fun." I connected the USB drive to the computer. On the screen, a bank statement from my father-in-law's Swiss account appeared. Over $50,000 transferred to Chloe Carter every month, regularly for the past 3 years. The reason was always support, but the last transaction indicated medical expenses. The date was exactly the day of Chloe's miscarriage. My father-in-law knew about Chloe's pregnancy. I frowned. Mason opened another file. Not only that, from Chloe's medical history, it turns out that during the period of conception, Ethan was on a business trip in Africa. The dates don't match. My eyes widened. Then that child. "The most interesting thing," said Mason, adjusting his glasses, "is that Vincent Hayes, despite knowing all this, helped Chloe hide the truth." My father smiled contemptuously. The relationship between Vincent and Chloe might not be as simple as father-in-law and daughter-in-law. This information made me nauseous. The Hayes family was even dirtier than I thought. "Tomorrow, at the birthday party, all the media will be there." I closed the laptop. It's time to give the Hayes family a very big gift. The next day, at noon, the Hayes mansion was decorated for a party, and luxury cars arrived one after another. I entered the hall on Ethan's arm, playing the role of a loving couple. Since his suspension, Ethan had become as docile as a stray dog. He didn't even dare to look me in the eye. "My dear, you've arrived." My father-in-law greeted me with a radiant face. His gaze lingered for a moment on the red diamond necklace on my neck, and his face tensed slightly. "This necklace was my mother's," I smiled sweetly. "I see you remember it, father-in-law." My father-in-law tried to remain calm and escorted us to the head table. High-ranking government officials and bank directors were there. I noticed that Chloe was also present. She wore a simple white dress and was sitting in a corner. Her belly was flat and her face was pale. When she felt my gaze, she lowered her head and started fidgeting with her napkin. The party began, and the MC announced the time for speeches. My father-in-law went on stage with a radiant face to boast about Hayes Construction's achievements. He didn't say a word about the recent scandals. There was applause as if the stock's fall and the disaster at the construction site a few days ago hadn't happened. Finally, I thank my daughter-in-law, Olivia, for her understanding and generosity. My father-in-law raised his glass. There was more applause. I stood up elegantly and walked to the stage. Ethan desperately tried to grab my dress from under the table, but I dodged him smoothly. "Father-in-law, you're charming." I took the microphone. "As a part of this family, I've prepared a special birthday gift," I signaled to Mason. As he manipulated the laptop, the hall's screen slowly descended. My father-in-law's face tensed as if he had a bad feeling. "First, let's take a look at the real plan for Hayes Construction's Elysian Fields complex." I pressed the button on the remote, and a murmur spread through the hall. The real plan was completely different from the advertised one. Some government officials suddenly paled. "President Hayes, what does this mean?" shouted the director of the Urban Planning Department, standing up. "A misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding." My father-in-law rushed onto the stage to snatch the microphone from me, but I quickly dodged him and moved to the next screen. And now, the bank statement from President Vincent Hayes's Swiss account. For the last 3 years, he has transferred over $50,000 every month to Miss Chloe Carter. With the clear bank records projected on the screen, a deathly silence fell over the hall. Chloe screamed and ran for the exit but was blocked by bodyguards. Finally, my voice suddenly turned sharp. "Miss Chloe Carter's pregnancy certificate. Calculating the period of conception. My husband was on a business trip in Africa." "Nonsense!" Ethan stood up. "I also have the DNA test result." I calmly projected the last slide. "Honey, that child wasn't mine." The hall exploded as if it had been hit by a bomb. Ethan rushed onto the stage like an enraged lion, but Liam blocked him. My father-in-law, his face gray, dropped the glass he was holding. "And there's something even more fun." I raised my voice and played a recording. In the recording, my father-in-law was telling Chloe, "Have the child. We'll make sure Ethan accepts it as his. The Carter family really needs this child to inherit Hayes Construction." Hearing those words, Ethan turned around and punched his father in the face. "You old fox." The situation completely spiraled out of control. The directors left the hall. The bank directors tore up the loan contracts they had prepared. The journalists couldn't stop taking pictures. I elegantly stepped off the stage, and amidst looks of shock and admiration, left the hall. Behind me, I heard Ethan's screams and my father-in-law's sobs. Chloe had collapsed on the floor, but no one paid her any attention. I got into the waiting car and took a deep breath. "Miss, where to?" Liam asked. "Let's go to the clinic." I looked at my phone. Chloe's subsequent medical history had arrived. I wanted to see her in person. Halfway there, Liam turned sharply. "Miss, we're being followed again." With a sharp screech of tires, our car crashed into the guardrail. I was thrown from my seat and hit my forehead on the back of the front seat. I saw stars. Through the rear window, I saw a black SUV without a license plate rapidly approaching us. "Get down!" Liam pushed my head down. The SUV rammed us again, this time on the side door. At that moment, 2 motorcycles appeared, and their riders shot at the SUV's tires. The SUV lost control, spun several times, and crashed into the guardrail. The Godfather's men. Liam reversed and sped away from the scene. "Are you all right?" I touched the bump on my forehead and smiled coldly. Ethan is really desperate. Returning to the safe house, I immediately called my father. "Dad." Ethan sent his men. "No, I'm fine. I survived." After hanging up, I checked the security cameras. As expected, at the Hayes mansion, Ethan and Chloe were arguing furiously. "It's all your fault. Now that witch has won. We're finished," Ethan shouted. Chloe smiled contemptuously. "That's not what your father said when we were in bed together. You, Hayes, are all the same." "Shut up." Ethan put his hands on her neck. "I'm going to kill you." Chloe struggled and, with a fruit knife she grabbed from the table, cut Ethan's face. He screamed and let her go. Chloe took the opportunity to flee the room. I turned off the cameras and was lost in thought. The dogfight was more interesting than expected. At that moment, Mason called. "Miss Russo, the result of the emergency board meeting has just come in. Ethan has been officially fired, and Vincent Hayes has been hospitalized for a heart attack. The stock has registered another maximum drop." Mason laughed lightly. "We now own 18% of the shares. With the support of some small shareholders, it's enough to launch a hostile takeover bid. It's not enough yet." I walked to the window. The night was dark as ink. I want to see Hayes Construction completely collapse. After hanging up, I opened the safe and took out a document that had been hidden for a long time. It was a copy of my mother's diary. In it was written the entire process of how my mother discovered the evidence of the Hayes and Carter families' crimes. The date on the last page was the day before her death. "Mom, it's almost over. None of them will escape." The next morning, Liam knocked quickly on the door. "Miss, there's a problem. Ethan and Chloe have disappeared." "They searched the mansion?" "I got up around 3 a.m. They drugged the guard and erased the camera recordings." Liam handed me a tablet. "But a camera in an alley caught them getting into a silver van. In the blurry recording, Ethan and Chloe were seen being dragged into a van by men in black. It didn't look like they were going voluntarily." "Those aren't our men," I frowned. "Check the fake license plate." Liam shook his head. But the van was heading to the port. I immediately called my father, but an unknown male voice answered. "Miss Russo, if you want to see your father and your husband again, come to warehouse number 3 at the port, alone, if not, through the phone." Ethan's terrified screams were heard. In the abandoned warehouse on the pier, the sea breeze carried a salty smell. I stood in the dark, toying with the small pistol hidden in my sleeve. The cold metal calmed me slightly. Liam and 6 bodyguards were scattered nearby, ready to act. "Miss, recon is done," I heard Liam's voice in my earpiece. "There are 2 men at the front door and 2 at the back. 4 in total. Unknown faces, don't look like local criminals." "Where's Dad?" confirmed with the thermal camera. "There are 4 people inside, 2 standing, 2 sitting. One of the sitting ones has a similar build to the Godfather." I took a deep breath and pressed the earpiece. "Execute the plan." After 5 minutes, from the back door of the warehouse, I heard dull thuds and the sound of something falling. I took the opportunity to approach the door and deliberately stepped on a piece of glass. "Who's there?" I heard a suspicious voice from inside. "I'm Olivia Russo. I was told to come alone." I raised my voice. With a creak, the iron door opened, and a gun was pointed at my forehead. The man holding the gun was a giant with a fearsome appearance. A scar under his left eye was particularly unsettling. "Search her," he ordered. I raised my hands docilely and let another man search me. They took my phone and my wallet but didn't find the knife hidden in my underwear or the pistol in my sleeve. "Get in." The man with the scar pushed me. The warehouse was dark and damp. A single light bulb hung in the center, the only source of light. Underneath, a man in a black trench coat sat with his back to me. On his sides were armed thugs. On the floor, Ethan and Chloe were huddled, their hands tied behind their backs and a gag in their mouths. Their faces were covered in blood. No sign of my father. "Miss Russo, I've heard a lot about you." The man in the trench coat turned slowly. A face I had never seen. About 40 years old, an aquiline nose, and a long scar that crossed his cheek to his neck. "Where's my father?" I asked bluntly. The man smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Don Michael is fine. I called you today to make you a proposal." "What proposal?" "The territories left by the Hayes and Carter families," he said, skillfully spinning a butterfly knife between his fingers. "Miss Russo has taken them down in a very elegant way lately. My boss likes it." "And who is your boss?" "It doesn't matter," he said, standing up and approaching Ethan, stroking his cheek with the tip of the knife. "What matters is that we can collaborate. You get your revenge, and we get their businesses. What do you say?" Ethan, terrified, widened his eyes and made muffled sounds, shaking his head. Chloe had already fainted. I smiled contemptuously. "You kidnapped my husband just to make me a cooperation proposal? Otherwise, we wouldn't have the honor of receiving someone like you, Miss Russo." The man shrugged. "Besides, consider yourself lucky that we did you the favor of taking care of this viper who tried to run you over." I slowly walked to the center. The sound of my heels on the cement was sharp and clear. "Let me guess. You're from the rival syndicate, the Wolf Pack, correct? I've heard that lately you've lost a lot of business in Europe because of my father." The man's face tensed slightly, and the movement of the knife stopped. "Miss Russo does her research well." "Not only that," I said, stopping 10 feet from him. "I also know about the shipments arriving at this port tonight. By now, an anonymous tip has already reached the feds." The furious man lunged at me with the knife, but at that moment, the warehouse roof suddenly exploded and 12 smoke grenades fell. Acrid smoke filled the warehouse in an instant. Gunshots, screams, footsteps, everything mixed in a pandemonium. "Miss, get down!" I heard Liam's voice in my earpiece. I threw myself to the ground and pulled the pistol from my sleeve. In the smoke, the man with the scar passed by me. I shot him in the knee. He fell screaming. After 5 minutes, when the smoke cleared, a dozen bodyguards armed to the teeth controlled the situation. The man in the trench coat and his thugs were on the ground, and Ethan and Chloe were propped up in a corner like dead dogs. "The Godfather is on his way." Liam brushed off my dress. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." I approached Ethan and roughly removed his gag. "Honey, your friends don't seem very reliable." Ethan, between tears and snot, begged, "Olivia, save me. These animals want to kill me. Too bad they didn't succeed." I stood up and told Liam, "Take them to the police station. Charges, kidnapping and attempted murder." "Attempted murder?" Liam asked, puzzled. I pointed to a camera in a corner of the warehouse. I just recorded their confession. They also admitted to planning yesterday's car accident. Hearing those words, Ethan suddenly screamed, "Olivia, you're a devil! This was all you're doing!" Liam kicked him. I shook my head and called my father. "Dad, everything's fine. The wolf pack tried to mess with us." "Yes, I've already notified the feds. I'm waiting for you." After hanging up, I left the warehouse. The morning sun, just rising over the horizon, gilded the port. In the distance, police sirens approached, and from the other direction, my father's cars arrived. 4 days later, an earthquake shook the financial world of New York. The Russo Group officially announced the acquisition of Hayes Construction. As the group's heir, I held a press conference where I revealed the long-standing corruption of Hayes Construction. That same day, the police raided the Carter Group's headquarters and arrested Grant Carter on multiple charges, including smuggling and bribery. My image, as I answered journalists' questions in front of the Hayes Construction building, was on the cover of all the news. A Chanel suit, my mother's red diamond necklace, and a confident gesture, a completely different image from the protagonist of a tragedy who, 6 months earlier, had been locked in a basement with a broken leg. "Miss Russo, as the new president, will you keep the current management?" a journalist asked. I smiled. "Of course not. Hayes Construction needs a complete overhaul, from management to company culture. It is said that your husband, Ethan Hayes, is accused of embezzlement and incitement to murder. What do you have to say about that?" "The law will dictate a fair judgment," I said, with a solemn expression. Personally, I feel deep regret and sadness for Mr. Hayes' actions. After the press conference, Mason was waiting for me in the boardroom. "Miss Russo, here are the final acquisition documents. Only your signature is missing." I looked at the documents and suddenly felt curious. "Mr. Miller, why are you helping me? Is it just because of my father?" Mason adjusted his glasses. "At first, yes, but," he hesitated, "something unusual for him. I'm impressed by your courage and intelligence." I smiled and signed the documents. "Hayes Construction, now Russo Holdings. I entrust it to you. I hope it becomes a truly responsible company. Where are you going?" Mason asked. I'm going to visit an old friend, I said, looking at the clock. This morning, Ethan was arrested. I need to comfort him. The prison visiting room was cold and silent. Ethan wore an orange jumpsuit with a long beard and bloodshot eyes. Seeing me, he lunged at the bulletproof glass. But a guard stopped him. "Olivia, you devil!" he shouted, banging on the glass. I picked up the phone in silence. "Ethan, your charges are embezzlement, fraud, incitement to murder. In total, you're facing no less than 20 years in prison. Oh, by the way, Chloe has decided to testify against you. She has turned over all the evidence, proving that you and Grant Carter planned the murder of the evicted tenants." Ethan's face turned pale. "Liar! It was all that old man Carter's doing. Of course." I took out a recorder and pressed play. In the recording, Ethan clearly said, "Send some men to teach the protesters a lesson. I don't care if someone dies. It's fake. That recording is fake," Ethan shouted. "The judge won't think so. And about the child Chloe lost. The DNA test result has arrived. It wasn't my son." Ethan froze as if struck by lightning. "Then whose was it?" "Your father's," I finished bluntly. Chloe confessed everything. Ethan collapsed in his chair as if his soul had flown away. "Finally, Hayes Construction is mine. All the shares in your name and your father's have been used to cover the funds you embezzled and to compensate the victims." Leaving the prison, the sun was dazzling. Liam was waiting for me by the car. "Miss, the Godfather wants you to go to the estate. He says he has something important to tell you." "All right." I got in the car. In 6 months, from being a victim of a failed marriage, I had become the heir to a multi-billion-dollar organization. The euphoria of revenge was slowly fading, leaving a feeling of emptiness. "Mom, can you see me? Everyone who hurt you is paid." The phone vibrated. A message from Mason. "Breaking news. Grant Carter has died in prison of a heart attack. The autopsy has revealed traces of a chronic poison in his body." I looked at the screen and smiled slowly. My father had planned everything. "Liam, tell Dad I'll be there for dinner tonight. And contact the Swiss bank to schedule an appointment to deposit my mother's necklace in a safe deposit box." "Yes, miss." Outside the window, the city skyline shone at sunset. My era had just begun. On the top floor of the Russo International Building, formerly Hayes Construction, I held a glass of whiskey and watched the magnificent night view of New York. 3 months had passed since Ethan was imprisoned and the company passed into my hands. I was there almost every night, but it still didn't seem real. "President Russo, here is today's financial report." Mason entered and left a document on my desk. "After resuming the Elysian Fields project, sales are exceeding expectations." "Good work, Director Miller." I took a sip of whiskey. Mason didn't leave but came closer. "You haven't attended any meetings for a week. The board of directors is worried." "What are they worried about? That I'll run off with the money?" I smiled contemptuously. "They're worried about you." Mason's voice became unusually soft. "After achieving revenge, many people fall into a sense of emptiness." Only then did I turn to look at him. Mason wasn't wearing glasses. He had dark circles under his eyes and a loose tie, a completely different image from his usual professional appearance. "It seems you need a break more than I do. Want a drink?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We drank in silence. "Why did you help me? Was it really just because of my father?" I asked suddenly. Mason swirled his glass. "At first, because of a debt of gratitude I owe the Godfather." He lifted his head. His eyes burned. "But now, because I admire who you are, Olivia Russo." My heart skipped a beat. I immediately looked away. "Don't make jokes like that. It's not a joke." Mason put down his glass and took a small box from his jacket. "It's a brooch your mother entrusted to my father. Now it returns to its true owner." I opened the box. Inside was a finely crafted pearl brooch. It was clearly a set with my mother's black pearl necklace. "My father told me that 20 years ago, after that fire, your mother saved your father. This brooch is the only memento your mother left." "Fire? What fire? The Godfather didn't tell you?" 20 years ago, the Carter chemical plant exploded. 3 neighboring districts were devastated. Suddenly, the glass I was holding felt heavy. My mother's death occurred right after that incident. I need to see my mother's diary. I put down the glass and grabbed my coat to leave. Wait, Mason stopped me. I've discovered the real reason Vincent Hayes sent money to Chloe. It wasn't for her, but for Grant Carter. Vincent was paying for his silence for his part in your mother's murder. 20 years. The USB drive I was holding was cold. Again, 20 years. The darkest period of my life. Tomorrow, I'll talk to my father and ask him everything. In the attic of my father's estate, in a dusty box, I found my mother's brown leather diary, the 3rd of May, 1998. I have obtained decisive evidence, the scene where Connor Carter kills a protester at the construction site. Tomorrow, I will report it. May 4. Vincent Hayes came. He wanted to buy the film reel for a large sum. I refused. When he left, his look was terrifying. Someone is following me. I've hidden a copy of the reel in the diary. The writing stopped there. The last page was torn out. I rummaged through the box and found a piece of an old photo. My mother, Vincent Hayes, and Connor Carter, posing in front of a sign that said Carter Chemicals. On the back of the photo was a small inscription, Shareholders Meeting, Carter Chemicals, February 1997. My mother's last name was Soler, my father's Rousseau. It was possible my mother was also a shareholder. At that moment, Liam called. "Miss, the godfather is in the hospital. A heart attack." In the hospital hallway, the red light of the operating room did not go out. It had been 3 hours since my father went in. What happened? We don't know. After the meeting with the Wolfpack representatives, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest, said an old member. "Miss, the godfather has hidden something from you. The fire 20 years ago was an attack on him. Connor Carter wanted to eliminate a competitor and collect the insurance." At that moment, the operating room door opened and the doctor came out. "He's past the critical stage, but he only has 6 months left." I entered the room. My father was surrounded by machines. "Olivia, have you seen the diary?" "Yes." "Where's the real mom hid?" "In the study at the estate, under the 3rd floor tile. Olivia, I entrust the syndicate to you." "No, don't think about those things." "No, listen." My father gripped my hand tightly. "Carter is dead, but the Wolfpack won't stop. Either you face them in an all-out war, or you dissolve the organization. The syndicate is too dirty. It's no place for a woman like you, Olivia. Don't be like me." I removed the 3rd floor tile in the study. Underneath was a rusty metal box. Inside, several film reels and a letter. My mother's letter. "To my dearest Olivia, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer in this world. Don't be too sad. It was my choice. Revenge does not bring peace. Only justice can. Yours forever, Mom." I fell to the floor crying. At that moment, a message from Mason arrived. "I've found it. Your mother didn't die from a fall. She was strangled and then thrown from the roof." The next morning, I gathered the old members of the organization in my office. "You all know my father's situation. I want to hear your opinion on the future of the syndicate." One of the elders, Dominic, spoke. "According to the rules, the young lady should take command. But right now, with the threat of the Wolfpack, it's a crisis situation. A strong leader is needed. Are you saying I'm not fit? Don't misunderstand me, but the organization is not like a business. I understand." I pressed a button on the table. Liam and armed bodyguards entered. "You have 3 options. First, help me transform the syndicate into a legal security company. Second, take a severance package and leave. Third, I took a folder from the drawer, surrender to the police. All your businesses are documented here." In the end, most of the elders chose retirement. Dominic, furious, left, saying he would join the Wolfpack. Liam, watch Dominic and arrange a meeting with the head of the Wolfpack. That afternoon, I went with Mason to the Elysian Fields construction site. It had become a beautiful park filled with the laughter of children. "This is what your mother would have liked to see," Mason said. At that moment, I understood. My mother left my father not because she didn't love him, but because she wanted the next generation not to live in violence and hatred. "Olivia," suddenly, Mason knelt and took a ring from his pocket. "I know it's too soon to say this, but I want to officially start courting you. Give me time." I covered his mouth, my eyes filled with tears. "When I've sorted things out with my father and the syndicate, I'll wait as long as it takes." He stood up and hugged me lightly. A few days later, my father had heart surgery. In the hallway, in front of the operating room, I toyed with my mother's black pearl necklace. Fortunately, the operation was a success. That afternoon, I met with Julian, the head of the Wolf Pack, at the Plaza Hotel. The syndicate will be dissolved and become a legal security company. We will cede part of the territories left by the Carter family on one condition: abandon all illegal businesses. After intense negotiation, Julian accepted the proposal. Returning to the hospital, my father was awake. I showed him my mother's letter and the evidence. He cried, "It's as if I killed her." "No, Dad, it's all over." My father took a document from under his pillow. "Sign it. The syndicate is yours now." It was a will bequeathing all his assets to me. The last page contained a clause. If Olivia Russo marries Mason Miller, 10% of the shares will be transferred to Mason Miller. My father laughed for the first time in a long time. "That boy is excellent, much better than the son-in-law your mother chose for me." A month later, Russo Security was officially launched. At a press conference, I announced that 10% of the profits from the Elysian Fields project would be donated to charity. "President Russo, it is said that your father was the founder of the syndicate. Is that true?" "Yes. My father once lost his way, but he spent the rest of his life trying to correct that mistake. Russo Security will offer an opportunity to all those who, like him, desire a new beginning." After the press conference, Mason took me to the Central Park of Elysian Fields. "Olivia, I've been thinking about something for a long time." He knelt and took out an old diamond ring. "This ring was my grandmother's. She told me to give it to the person who could end the painful history of our family." I thought of my mother's letter. "Justice, not revenge." "All right, but on one condition: turn the top floor of the Hayes Construction Building into a children's library named after my mother." Mason put the ring on my finger and kissed the back of my hand. "Of course." On the wedding day, my father walked me down the aisle. Mason was waiting for me at the end of the aisle with eyes full of love. I tied my mother's black pearl necklace to my bouquet. On our honeymoon, I whispered to Mason, "I think I'm pregnant. If it's a girl, I want to name her after my mother, Eleanor." Mason hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Olivia, for breaking this terrible chain of hatred." In the distance, a new day was dawning. My mother's pearls shone under the starlight, like a period that marked the end of everything and the beginning of everything else.